What I'll talk about in the 10 minutes is how I came through my own personal journey and the journey of some of the teams that I've worked with, and how I recognised that that was actually the fundamental lesson in then moving on towards value in healthcare. So about 6 or 7 years ago, I was that neurologist who was badly managing migraines and who was walking around with a CD around the hospital. And a colleague of mine retired and I took on his job. And we sat down and went through the job plan, and he said, so these are the 4 clinics where you'll follow up my sort of 20 years of follow-up patients, and these are the 10 hours of meeting that you'll be doing every week. And then just as he was about to go, he said, oh, so I forgot to mention, it's not actually in your job plan, but it's always quite useful to go up to the stroke unit on a Monday. You don't have to do anything. There's nothing to be done from a neurologist point of view. But there's a couple of patients there, and you can teach the medical students about the physical signs you can see. So I walked up to the ward, and that was my first epiphany, because that was really my first interaction with a group of people who were a fantastic, dedicated team, who cared about individuals, who treated patients irrespective of their age, whether they were demented, their mobility problems. They looked after those individuals with a vision and a purpose to make them better. And I thought, fantastic, I want to work with these people, I want to be part of this team. So I thought, well, what can I do? I mean, I could be annoying and just give them a new name for their condition and say, well, this patient isn't actually a stroke, he's got a lateral medullary syndrome, and give them fancy names. Or I can maybe try and do something useful. And at that time in our hospital, we didn't have a clot busting or thrombolysis service. So I thought, well, why don't I try and set one up? And so the first thing I did was I collaborated with somebody who I thought would be very helpful in doing that. And so the first person I turned to was a cardiologist, because the cardiologists have been unblocking tubes for 15, 20 years. They're very good at it, they know how to do it efficiently, they know how to do it well. And so I started working with a very enthusiastic cardiologist called Robbie Rackett. And we set up an innovative model for thrombolysis that they're all free, working with a multidisciplinary team with nurses, cardiologists, neurologists. And we set up this fantastic 24-hour service, which was nominated for a BMJ award. And we were very proud, and we thought, this is great. And we were trying to monitor our performance, and we were doing well. We were first and second in the national UK audits. And we were in a very comfortable position, thinking, yeah, this is great. And then suddenly the music stopped. And we looked around, and there had been this strategy that had come from the Darcy reforms about trying to take conditions like stroke and trying to consolidate the services so that large groups of patients all got expert care. And visionary people who decided to run with that strategy, Ruth Cornell, Andy Mitchell, realised that there was lots of pockets, some quite good. Our centre, where we were seeing 250 patients a year, other centres to the north of London who were seeing 500 or 600 patients with outcomes were very, very poor. Many of those patients weren't getting into stroke services. And there was this inequity. And so that although our service effectively was no longer going to be able to provide that hyper-acute service, that they're all free, I and the people that I worked with recognised that we had something to give and that there was a need for consolidation of expertise. And so we got over that difficulty about not providing it in the place that we worked in and started to collaborate ruthlessly with our, up to that point, our competitors at UCLH to try and create a service that would be available for everybody. So for the 1,500 patients in North Central London, they would all, instead of coming into 6 centres, would be coming into 1 centre, being met at the door, having expert care, having the intervention that they needed by the people who needed to be giving it. And that really struck home to me, and something happened. So what was important for me is that that expertise that was available across a whole geography could be brought together. So it was engaging people. It was about collaborating and saying, so we know that you've had the service there, we know you've got expertise. We want to use that resource and for you to come together with other colleagues and work together. And so we created this network across North Central London where all of the expertise now comes together. And I was on for the hyperacute unit at the weekend, and we thrombolised 5 patients. And I was calculating Given the number of patients that we were saying were all free, even though we were a good centre, it would have taken me 3 months of being constantly on call before I would have thrombolised 5 people in the previous place I was working in. So I thought what I was doing was good, but it was only for a small number of people, and it comes back. It resonates with what Professor Porter said. Actually consolidating that expertise so that you do have the volume has remarkable effects. So across London, we've gone from a thrombolysis rate of 3.5%, which was actually good. That was about 10 times better than other places in the United Kingdom. But we managed to increase that across London to 14%. And we've been able to show that our mortalities, our outcome figures have reduced. So good centres in London were demonstrating 30-day mortality rates of 12%. Across London, that's dropped down to 7%. And by concentrating that expertise with the volume, it again falls in with what Professor Porter said earlier. That is actually saving costs. So there's an upfront cost that was put into that system, and at 30 days there will be a cost, but if you look at the measurements at 3 months, it's actually saving the system money. But more importantly than that, in creating that process which helps a large group of people, it's allowed a group of experts to come together and to start to innovate and to look at other parts of the pathway. So the things that I'm particularly passionate and proud to be involved in are taking responsibility for the patient journey. So we have now, working within UCLP and the King's Fund, we've created a group of metrics that follows the patient all the way through. We're working with our economists so that we can put an economic value onto that, so that we can demonstrate that we're providing value. But more importantly, it also allows you to stand back and say, well, this is a system that we're only concentrating on once somebody comes in through the front door with a stroke. That's a failure within the system. Our responsibility is to look to prevent that happening. And so again, I was drawn to the cardiologists because again, the cardiologists are people who have realised far before we did that we need to be working together to prevent these problems from happening. We have a responsibility as carers, as clinicians, as professionals, to stop illness happening, to treat it to the best of our ability, and also to take responsibility for the whole patient journey. And I think if we're all focused on that, and if we're all collaborating and working together, then I think that we can achieve it. And I think if we're able to demonstrate good practice in something like stroke, which 6 years ago was regarded as a condition that you didn't need to bother about because nothing could be done, if we can do that for stroke, we can do it for all the long-term conditions. And I think we have to learn from each other and not be sort of siloed into individual diseases. We should be thinking about how we can help our patients. So for me, that's been my journey over the last 5 or 6 years. UCLPartners has been a fantastic organisation that's facilitated this work. But the other people who facilitated it is the Cardiac and Stroke Network. Networks and organisations that help people to come together and provide resource and help facilitate change are fundamental, because we can't do these things on our own. We have to work within organisations. So that's my story, and I think Pam is now going to host us a question and answer session.